Now that Ironheart episodes 4, 5, and 6 are available on Disney+, and regardless of the major cameo of Mephisto portrayed by Sacha Baron Cohen, really didn't save or salvage the series in any way, shape, or form. Now, I will admit, he was very good at that role. That's not to say that I'm defending this series or that I'm a fan of Ironheart, but Mephisto in isolation, Sacha Baron Cohen nailed that role, and he really does deserve to actually show up in more cameo moments in the MCU, or even in major roles in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new, and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. Now, there's been a lot of drama sparking between Robert Downey Jr. and Disney/Marvel executives and what's been going on over there. As we discussed yesterday, there's been a lot of problems between himself in full agreement with the press tour for Ironheart and how they really did present a lot of false promises to Robert Downey Jr. If you guys want to go ahead and check that out, we actually talked about that just yesterday, but focusing on something else here entirely is creating an even bigger grudge between Robert Downey Jr., Bob Iger, and Kevin Feige, and how this had a lot to do with specific cameos of Iron Man/Tony Stark in a very unexpected way. Now, one thing about Ironheart is that we know that there were a lot of changes from the actual comics back in 2016 to the live-action adaptation in the show. And the biggest one of all, by the way, is that, well, Tony Stark didn't show up in the final cut, but this is where it gets very interesting because there were actual plans and there were actual things that were created to actually bring in Tony Stark. So with both Disney and Marvel now in panic mode over the ratings disaster that is Ironheart, after all episodes have been released, one significant development now involves more drama related to Robert Downey Jr. and recent arguments that took place in the midst of the Ironheart backlash. It turns out that during re-edits of Ironheart that took place just a little over 2 months ago after a test screening took place that created drama between Robert Downey Jr. involved a series of scenes that were going to showcase cameos of Tony Stark in the form of a hologram, number 1, revealing secrets about Obadiah Stane. The initial plan by Marvel was to create retcons for Iron Man 1's villain, Ironmonger, through a specific confession by Tony Stark that would have been discovered by Riri Williams. Now, this scene was completed and deleted and was developed through deepfake technology and voice modulators, something that Robert Downey Jr. gave full permission for Disney and Marvel to do. This specific scene was supposed to appear in the early episodes, specifically around episode 2, where Zeke Stane was supposed to actually show Riri Williams this hologram. It turns out, however, that they went against the promise that they actually gave to RDJ when they deleted the scene after multiple test screenings that took place, and there were also other scenes that were going to take advantage of archived footage and CGI techniques to use in the form as flashbacks for Tony Stark, and multiple scenes where Tony would show up in Riri Williams' dreams. All of these scenes were scrapped, and Robert Downey Jr. had a serious issue with that decision, but most recently Robert Downey Jr. is even more upset about is that now both Disney and Marvel have fully agreed to never show these scenes on social media in the form of deleted material. Something that, of course, was reportedly agreed upon in RDJ's contract that he had signed for Doomsday when he actually got on board for that quite some time ago. His appearances in Ironheart were not only scrapped without a warning, but also RDJ took part in Ironheart in the press tour in belief by Disney that this would not only improve the ratings, but also was promised that his scenes would eventually show up at the most as deleted material on Disney+, which is now no longer the case. This created intense arguments between both RDJ and Disney executives after they pulled this stunt. Now, this is not so shocking. Remember, after Disney offered to pay Jeremy Renner far less money for Hawkeye Season 2 when he spoke out against Disney, already RDJ is now demanding these scenes to be shown to all Marvel fans on the Disney Plus platform after witnessing the scenes himself and how he thoroughly enjoyed the actual moments that he actually, of course, where it pays tribute to Tony Stark. Now, let me say one thing about this before I move on. The fact that they truly just got rid of all moments that would have honored Tony Stark or would have actually paid tribute to the character in some way, shape, or form is a bad decision. And look, we know that some scenes would have made no sense. I think that him showing up in Riri Williams' dreams would have made no sense at all, because she has no actual relation to that character. You know, she really never had a personal friendship with that character to a degree that we have seen with past characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, I think that the hologram thing would have been interesting, you know, putting out different confessions about Obadiah Stane through his son, you know, Joe McGullicuddy. Zeke Stane is the real name, of course. But again, we know that there's a lot of things going on here when it comes down to Disney. They always break promises. They did the same exact thing with a lot of the Star Wars material out there. They did the same exact thing with Snow White 2025, and the list goes on and on. Now, they did this, of course, also with Jeremy Renner, alright? We know that they offered him far less money when they initially promised him more money for Hawkeye Season 2 after his accident. That's when they magically said, we're going to pay you less money for Hawkeye Season 2. And he had a very big issue with that, and he spoke out against Disney. And I do give him a lot of props for that. However, continuing on, Bob Iger and Kevin Feige and their arguments were that by releasing these scenes featuring Tony/Iron Man, and even putting them in the show to begin with, it would overshine the character of Riri Williams. These tensions that sparked between both RDJ and Disney executives, including Iger, are also making everything awkward for his involvement in Avengers Doomsday. However, it is so far not creating any delay on production for that movie at all. RDJ, however, did get involved in a heated argument with Disney and Marvel execs when they handed out false promises to him yet again in relation to Ironheart. Now, look, we know that he was trying to, you know, really take part in the press tour. He was actually forced to take part in that press tour because we talked about this as well. It was actually written into his contract when he signed on for Avengers Doomsday to promote Ironheart as a series. And there are moments right now that Disney is trying to pressuring him. We talked about this as well. They're trying to pressure him to speak up against the backlash, to go against the overall Marvel fans that have a very big issue with Ironheart, and they want him to speak about the importance of DEI. He doesn't want to do that. The only thing that he is willing to do right now is to speak up against the backlash, and that is it, period. But Disney wants him to do both, and he's having a very big problem with that as well. So look, it's not that RDJ in isolation is 100% on board with the, of course, you know, Disney plans, but they already know that RDJ is trying to just do his thing at this point. And one thing about this is the fact that they were going to pay tribute to Tony Stark, they were going to have some appearances here and there, you know, with him showing up on televisions, him showing up in flashbacks or in Riri Williams' mind/dreams. The best one of all, I think, would have been that hologram that Obadiah Stane's son would have displayed to Riri, and how it would be a confession about something very specific about Obadiah that would retcon Iron Man 1. Whether or not that would have been for better or worse, who knows? I'm not really a fan of retcons, period, but I think it would have been a very interesting take to see how that would have actually steered things in a different direction. Would it really have helped the show or not? That's a big question as well. I honestly don't think it would have, but I would like to hear what everyone has to say about all of this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.